Ladies and gentlemen, please silence your phones and hush your babies. The show is about to start.
I offer my personal welcome to this
Nemo
and Cole Conference
halftime
show.
Hey everyone, we're back. I've slept a little bit, and we're here to commentate on the Sunday morning session of I've put it Sunday afternoon session in my notes, but it's Sunday morning session of General Conference. That is how tired I am. But I have support, I have people to help me, and most importantly, I have the results of Jesus, Joe, or Russell. So still all to play for. Joseph Smith, on the highest score I've seen him in possibly years. He's on a really high score at the moment. People seem to be really kind of pushing restoration narratives that they haven't been pushing for a little while. Russell only 15 behind Jesus, so still all to play for. But for the first time, certainly since I've been doing this, we've had Jesus in the lead in a session, but then Joseph Smith quoted more than Russell M. Nelson in a session. Just let that sink in for a moment. The prophet of the restoration is back. He's back in force, and he will not be put out the way. He will not be set aside. Yeah, that's what we've got there. But I have Ruth Heath joining me.
Hello.
Hey, Ruth, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm usually in the live chat. I might be able to multitask and do both, but yeah,
Ooh.
I'm here.
Okay, well, good to see you. Did you enjoy watching that session of conference? Is enjoy the right word?
Is enjoy the right word? It was a trip down memory lane, and my daughter, who was making food in the kitchen, she said, "You're re-traumatizing me, mother." she could hear it in the living room. So it was interesting. It was interesting to see what's stayed the same. It was interesting to see what's changed. Some of the sort of rhetoric has definitely changed. Mm-hmm. Interesting to see how very, very frail a lot of people look as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, my husband, because I was the one sitting through conference, and he is the one that is going to learn and stay at my knees. But
nice.
we won't go there yet. Has brought me donuts. So
brought you donuts.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful.
I'd say donuts myself, but he didn't. Yeah, go ahead.
Grab your donuts or jammy dodgers, whatever it is you think you're going to need to get through this, and let's crack on. I find that sometimes I struggle to find something to say about talks. And I was actually saying to my wife, we were on a little walk this morning, I was saying, there wasn't anything terribly controversial in yesterday's sessions, particularly apart from the abortion talk that seems to have sparked a bit of controversy online. But generally, there wasn't really a lot to say. It was a very benign conference. But I said to her, David A. Bednar hasn't spoken yet, so there's still time for, something interesting to come up. And I don't think he disappointed.
No.
He did not. But before we get to David A. Bednar, Henry Byron was conducting. He did so seated. He did that last conference as well. And we have settled into a pattern now. I predict that we're going to see an apostle conduct the next session, a junior apostle conduct the next session of conference, because the pattern seems to have become that Eyring will do one on one of the days, Oakes will do one on one of the days, and in the session that they conduct, the other member of the First Presidency who isn't conducting will speak. That seems to be a fairly sort of reliable pattern now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Nelson's viewing from home. So this is the fourth session he's called in now. He's kind of phoned it in.
Is that a euphemism for he's completely unable to participate in anything anymore?
Well, I mean, I'll say it one more time. All it would take to get him into the conference center to be there in person would be to put him in a wheelchair, bring him down his golden elevator into the corridors underneath, up another elevator, and then into the center, the conference center.
I was really surprised, because I'm not surprised that some of them need to sit down occasionally. That's fine. But I was really surprised when they panned out and we realized that, Eyring isn't just sat down at the pulpit. He's sat in his chair, and they've just placed a little sort of shelf table in front of him to make it appear like he's at the lectern. And
they've given him a mini lectern, right?
They have, and I get it, but it just really, really emphasises how very frail and old they are now. That he physically you're not going to see him moving in and out of position because he's not equipped for that. So they're going to hide that from the viewing audience, and yeah, just launch straight into it from his red velvet chair. Did you catch, you might not have done, but did you catch the little bit of intro before we went into main session? So between the music and the spoken word and the main session, there was a missionary just introducing what general conference is. Yeah. Okay. So did you say you did catch it?
I did catch it, but tell me what your thoughts were about it.
Well, so I've noticed quite a lot in our live chat comments that some people get really, really miffed that people who I no longer believe in the church. I no longer believe in the truth claims of the church. That doesn't mean to say I don't respect a lot of the members of the church, because a lot of them are good people. I've got a lot of time for people who want to do better with the world and all of those sorts of things. But they get a little bit squiffy about who's allowed to be at general conference and who's not, and who's allowed to participate and who's not. And what I thought was lovely is that this sister missionary from Botswana said this is a global gathering and that everyone is welcome to tune in. So there you go. For the naysayers in the comments, we are all welcome to join in. So there we go.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Right. Okay. So we had the Tabernacle Choir singing, who I'll never say a bad word about again. I might. But we got to play another game of Where's Jim?
I'm loving the Where's Jim game.
Where's Jim is my new favourite conference halftime show. It's my new favourite one, for sure.
With the spicy version of Where's Karen, because we all want to know who she is now.
But I'm not going to say.
Was she visible?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
The plot thickens. So the game of Where's Jim, we got an absolute corker here. We got to see. Look, there's Jim right at the back there.
Oh, Jim.
Back row on the left. There's Jim. But we got an even better shot, and this was during music and the spoken word. There's Jim.
Fantastic.
We found Jim. It's his fault for being so tall. If he was shorter, he'd be further forward. It's his fault. Anyway, so we had an opening prayer by Raphael E. Pino, and then we got into David A. Bednar. Ruth, I'm going to ask you for your sort of overview on this one. Yeah.
So I feel like David A. Bednar is setting out his stall for how he thinks the church, the direction of the church when it's under his leadership. I think he's setting out the stall, which is we are going back to that it's a gospel of restoration. Joseph Smith is a prophet, seer, and revelator. This is one of the most important events in the history of the world. And there was definitely a first vision narrative that he absolutely nailed down. That is what he's going to own that. And that is, his version of the first vision. Don't worry about all the other versions. This is the Bednar version. That's the one he's sticking to. So I'd be interested for those people that are much better scholars of the first vision accounts than I am to say, based on the details that he gave, which version of the truth is his version of the truth.
Let's take a look, shall we? There we go. Because he starts this little VT here by talking about different versions of the first vision.
Yeah.
In this combined narrative.
1820, a young boy named Joseph Smith went into the woods near his home to pray. He had questions regarding the salvation of his soul, and he yearned to know which of all the churches was right, that he might know which to join.
Okay, so there's a combination of two parts of the narrative. 1832 is he's concerned about the salvation of his soul. 1838 is very much about which church to join.
Yes,
and he's just putting them both together so that in an attempt, as we're seeing more and more, now that it's more common knowledge that there's multiple accounts of the first vision, this is part of an attempt to kind of normalize both elements, one from one account, one from another, being kind of in this combined narrative, right?
But then he goes on to talk about there was God and Jesus Christ appearing. Now, that's not in the very first version of the first vision, is it? That was an angel. Am I right?
Yeah, there was the Lord was in the first version of his vision.
Lord's in the first one, okay.
Yeah, and
But
then there's
in
the two
Bednar's-
personages.
In Bednar's version, it's very definitely two distinct personages, God and Jesus Christ.
And that's why it's interesting, as we'll see in a second. He takes details from 1832 and adds them almost to 1838, but he still only quotes 1838, which we'll see.
Yes.
Joseph trusted that God would answer his prayer and direct him. Please note that Joseph did not pray merely to know what was right. Rather, he prayed to know what was right so he could do what was right. Joseph asked in faith and was determined to act in accordance with the answers he received. In response to his sincere prayer, God the Father and his Son Jesus Christ appeared to Joseph,
Two beings,
and inaugurated the restitution of all things as foretold in the Bible.
And he later goes on to quote the 1838 account. That's the only one he actually quotes. So,
which is the one we had to memorize in seminary. I don't know.
indeed. And for the longest time, that was the only one that people really read or knew.
The one anyone knew about. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing we got was then, because he was talking about the miraculous events that led to the restoration of the church. And he mentioned that it is today the 195th year anniversary of the organization of the church. It's a very interesting fact. And he talks about the restitution of all things. He says, he quotes Joseph Smith saying, "I saw two personages." That's the quote he gives from the 1838 account. And then he goes on the translation of the Book of Mormon. And it was interesting because Bednar was the one that said the Book of Mormon is not primarily a history book.
Yes.
I think a couple of conferences ago.
Well, he's changed his mind on that. He's back to it. It definitely is history.
He's back to it's definitely history. It's a hemispheric history. He's not going heartland model. He's doing what most people would have done post the early 1900s after the B.H. Roberts meetings. He's gone, right, okay, it's a larger area that this took place over. He's still holding that position, but Joseph Smith translated an ancient record. The word translation, there's no room for maneuver here. If people are going to look at the testimony of the witnesses, they will also encounter a tight translation narrative. So people that are peddling this loose translation narrative, Bednar says, stop it, essentially, with this next little presentation here, which I will play for you now, if I can. There we go.
Translation and coming forth of the Book of Mormon. Joseph Smith was given the gift and power of God to translate an ancient record, the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ. This sacred text includes an account of the personal ministry of Jesus Christ among people in the Western Hemisphere soon after his resurrection.
Yep, Western Hemisphere. Cool. But it's an ancient record, and Joseph translated it.
Yeah.
So he's not soft peddling that narrative anymore. The gift and power of God has always been part of the narrative. I'm pretty sure it's in the Book of Mormon itself. It was translated by the gift and power of God, but it was still translated through those means.
Yeah.
And translation means you looked at one language and you turned it into another one.
Yeah. And it's a literal translation. It's not inspiration. It is translating one thing for another. And he goes on to, well, I think he does it early when he's talking about the first vision account. He seals that with his testimony. So stand in front of a court of law. Bednar's going to say that event is true. That event, as he's narrated it, is exactly what happened. He's testifying to that. Mm-hmm. If he wants to put his hand up and swear to that, that's on him. Now, he also, and this is why I think he's nailing it down for his reign. He then goes on to talk about his pet projects, which is authority, doctrine, covenants, ordinances, the whole thing. It's all been restored. The keys for the priesthood, all been restored. And that's his USP for the gospel, isn't it? That's what the church is bringing, is nothing about relationship with Christ. It's that we have something that other people don't. And in that way, I think he's taking 3 massive steps backwards from where the church currently seems to be trying to position themselves, which is aligning with mainstream American Christianity. They he seems to be sort of putting his mark in the ground and saying, when it's under me, this is what I think is the important bits of this. I think he's doing the equivalent of what Nelson did under Hinckley, of trying to sort of say, I think we should use the name Jesus Christ and get him patted on the head. And when he got the reins, then leading it in that direction. I think this is Bednar's moment to set out his stall.
That's fair. And his reign will be long. I think at current projections, he could have like a 10-year presidency or something like that, which is wild to think.
Did he put dates next to priesthood keys being restored that we don't necessarily know?
He said that in the same year as the Aaronic priesthood restoration was the Melchizedek priesthood restoration. I don't know the ins and outs of this well enough, so I'll defer to others in the comments who know better than I do. But I know there is some vagueness around exactly when the Melchizedek priesthood restoration happened and when Joseph first started telling people that it had happened. One big mistake that David A. Bednar lent into, and someone else in this conference, which we'll get to, also lent into, was the Elias, Elijah, and Moses issue, which I will explain in just a moment. But let's have this.
After the formal organization of the church in the Kirtland Temple, Moses, Elias, and Elijah committed to Joseph the additional authority necessary to accomplish God's work in the latter days.
Yeah. Elias, Elijah, and Moses. The reason that's a problem is because Elias and Elijah are the Greek and Hebrew names for the same prophet. Joseph Smith didn't seem to know that, but he claimed that two separate individuals spoke to him in the Kirtland Temple, but he gave names of the same individual. So who was this Elias? I think Bruce R. McConkie came up with some idea that he is a prophet from the time of Abraham, something like that. But it's a big problem. Your thoughts on that, Ruth?
Well, it's a big problem, but if you're suspending your hanging your sanity upon a hook as you come into the room anyway, it's not a problem, is it? You're already believing all of these things have happened. You're going to take his word for it. And the fact that scholars of the Bible would say, actually, that's just a misunderstanding, and that is the same person, they will poo-poo that because, well, they're not our scholars. And I find it both frustrating and also I pity them a little bit, because they can class themselves scholars in the little sphere of their own school that they pay for and the research that they allow to happen. Because if you dare to look further and actually do proper scholarship, you get kicked out on your ear. You're a scholar until you say something that contradicts what they want you to say, and then you're gone. But yeah, what a shame, because he's an old man. It could have been his chance to actually align with current understanding and actual biblical scholarship, and he's chosen to just go in a backwards direction.
But as far as I know, the church hasn't given, other than what McConkie said, and I believe it's in Mormon doctrine, about who Elias was. They've kind of reprinted it in the Ensign, in the Friend, and some other places. But as far as I know, the church hasn't given any sort of real explanation, sort of as to the very apparent sort of contradiction that's going on there. They've not really engaged in it, as it were. They've just kind of said, oh, well, it must have been someone else then, but we can't really tell you exactly who it was. But the problem is Joseph clearly thought that it was as he was mentioned in the Bible, because the things that are restored, the keys that are restored, are very similar, because Elijah and Elias, being the same person, had the same biblical roles of the keys to turn the hearts of fathers to children.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't stack up, and Gong's going to mention it again later.
Are you saying that it stands as evidence then that Joseph didn't understand and didn't actually see these people, because otherwise he would have spotted the flaw in that biblical narrative? And
I would say,
physically seeing that person, he would know, oh, hang on a minute, it's the same guy.
I would say it stands as evidence that Joseph did not correctly identify the individuals that appeared to him in vision. That's if you're talking like the least level of what you can take from that. That's the base of what you have to take from that. Is that Joseph? I think it's pretty good evidence Joseph didn't correctly understand or identify the individuals that were speaking to him, appeared in a vision. You could then take that to go further and say, which means he was probably making up the whole vision, but I don't think that
Either
necessitates that, right?
Or Elijah has one of those quick change outfits. He's appeared in one outfit, goes out the door, comes back in again, completely different outfit, and he's managed to catch him off guard and pretend to be. And now I will be playing the character Elias.
I don't ever want to take a piece of evidence or a piece of disconfirming information and make it mean more than it means. I try not to do that where I can. But yeah, it's definitely a problem, and it's 2025, and it's not been addressed particularly well, and it's still being spoken over the pulpit in general conference. So it is still the position of the church that those three individuals with those three names appeared to Joseph Smith.
Now he then went on to talk about all of that happening, all of those events happening, and they're all anchored in the cornerstone, which is Jesus Christ. So that's his way of hooking in to mainstream Christianity, I suppose, at that point, which is we've got all of this restoration stuff going on that perhaps you don't understand mainstream Christianity, but actually all of it's anchored into this cornerstone. We bring it all back to Jesus Christ. All of these, this authority, this doctrine, these covenants, these ordinances that we follow, that we've had restored, that nobody else has got, but we all believe in the same Jesus.
David A. Bednar gave 5 Joseph Smith quotes. 5 Joseph Smith quotes, which was the most, and it's the most I've recorded for quite a while, but he was talking about the restoration of the gospel, so there we are. He also sneaks in quotes, which for a man who kind of got caught out plagiarizing a talk a few conferences back, really should be better at quoting his sources. Because the way that I'm counting Jesus, Joe, or Russell is I'm watching the conference and I'm watching with subtitles or with captions. And these talks are pre-prepared and the captions are pre-uploaded. So these captions will have quotation marks on phrases that are otherwise not indicated to be quotes. When the talk's written down, it will be clear. But when it's just spoken, they will use... So some of it is I can hear Russell M. Nelson's catchphrases. I'm like, oh, that's a Russell M. Nelson catchphrase. So they've picked out that. And sometimes I'll look at it and it'll say it's a quote. And I'll be like, right, okay. So I'll spend time to open up Google tabs and I'll type in the quote LDS, and then I'll see where I can find who said it. And then I will find who said what. But Bednar's particularly bad for it. Just not saying that he's quoting someone, and the only way of knowing is seeing in the closed captions that it's a quote.
Are you missing Tommy Monson saying close quotes?
Said he. I'm missing Gordon B. Hinckley's said he's. Which was, I think that was one he did a lot. Yeah, the poet has written, etc. Stephen D. Shumway, my goodness, I would love someone to like me as much as he likes Neil L. Anderson. It would be great for your sense of self-worth, wouldn't it? Which as a Brit, mine is terribly low very often. But Shumway, he got hazed by Anderson, as far as I can tell. Yeah, here we go.
I was standing in a hall when Elder Neil Anderson walked by. I'd just been called as a new general authority. Likely sensing my feelings of inadequacy, he smiled and said, "Well, there looks like a man who has absolutely no idea what he's doing." And I thought, there looks like a true prophet and seer. Elder Anderson then whispered, "Don't worry, Elder Shumway. It gets better in 5 or 6 years."
It's like picking on the new guy. I mean, I actually listening to that the third time, I now kind of get the joke he was trying to make, which is like, oh yes, he sees that I don't know what I'm doing, right? I guess that's what it. But when he's like, there's a true prophet and seer, it's, oh come on, can we stop with the
If that's
sort of
the level of their prophesying,
cacophony?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
This talk to me seemed to be like, do callings. Know someone
Oh,
in your ward that doesn't have a calling, make them do one or get them to do one. Stop just giving, which this is the good part of it, stop just giving callings to the same 10 people who will do
yeah.
everything.
What was his phrase? I've written it down somewhere. Oh gosh, it was something about giving it to people who are. Oh yeah, we've got a blind spot of those deemed worthy. Invite the unlikely to serve.
Yeah. It's interesting because I would seem pretty unlikely. Not
And no one's asking you. I'm
not
really.
invited. Well, my to be fair, my first bishop did in Oxford. He was like, "I'd love to give you a calling." I was like, "I'm not sure the rest of the ward would like it." You know, they seem pretty okay with some of my engagement with the ward. You know, they're happy to have me here on a Sunday. They're happy for me to get involved, but I don't think they'd quite like me as a Sunday school teacher somehow.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's.
I thought he went straight out the gates really with talk of the second coming, and at the moment with obviously over the last few years there's been lots of prepper culture that's overlapped with mainstream Mormonism. Obviously we've got the Laurie Daybell, as she likes to now be called, trial going on at the moment. You know, the whole second coming visions of glory mob will have their ears pricking up when somebody starts to talk about the second coming. And he was the first of the talks that did it, but you know, we went on and heard further. I just think that's a dangerous rhetoric unless you're going to be really careful about what you say and what you don't say, unless you nail down and say what's appropriate and what's completely inappropriate.
But we had yesterday. So you gave me just enough time to get through my jammy dodges.
Chill away.
We saw yesterday when I believe it was Renland who was talking about a young primary girl that came up to him and said, "I'm scared about the second coming. You know, it worries me. It gives me anxiety."
Yeah.
He's like, "Well, don't worry, because the bad stuff's going to happen to other people, not you." Was essentially the message, right? If you do what you're meant to, then the bad stuff won't happen to you. Yeah. And there's the bit that's always forgotten, which is the bad stuff will happen to the other people. This is other people burning as the earth burns. They burn as stubble, right? And the righteous will be protected. Which is great for the righteous, great for the in-group, but I wonder what the others did to deserve burning in such a way.
And it's also presuming that little girl is going to be really happy to just stand and watch a group of people burn.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been comfortable with that idea. I was saying on the show that I did. I used to have fears of the second coming, and I also have fears of, even if I was righteous enough, observing what would happen to the other people. I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
Dave in the comments says, "I wanted to be cremated anyway." Well, I suppose then, Dave, you'll get your wish. But yeah, it was just an odd talk for me generally. It seemed, again, like a bit of an audition talk. He was just trying to like lay his mark,
isn't it? Yeah. He seemed a little bit giddy, a little bit overexcited.
I'm in the club.
Wanted to name drop that he'd met Anderson, and then, did you cringe? The whole prosperity gospel thing. I did my calling because that's what you're supposed to do, and I got a wife out of it. Just,
dear,
good grief. It just lands. It's just crass. It just lands really poorly in this day and age, I think, when we know how many people within the church have struggles to say that's why you do a calling, or that's the result of doing a calling. You'll get married. I mean, come on.
I appreciate the underlying sentiment, which is we often look back at things in our lives and wonder whether we maybe should have done differently. But it is good to recognize that had you done things differently, things wouldn't have happened that you now enjoy. You know, I'm grateful, and I'll always be grateful that as a YSA, I was heavily involved in the YSA program in the UK, and I would volunteer to sing in choirs, and I sang in the choir at Bristol Convention, and so did my wife, and that's how we met. You know, I will always be grateful for that. I'll always be grateful for the YSA program for that, because I love my wife. And so I get that sentiment from him. I think it is a bit much to be like, so always do a calling because you never know what good thing might come from it.
He made it sound transactional.
Yes.
Because I did my calling.
Yeah.
That's why I got my.
Yeah.
That's a little bit crass.
Yes. Agree.
Rather than I did something that was of interest. Your thing. You did something that was something you're passionate about, something you have a love for, and you met somebody who had a similar interest and you know had things in common. Well, that's a good way to meet a life partner, I would have thought.
I mean, maybe his wife really likes ice cream. And
Maybe.
he, you know, she was like, this guy's serving me ice cream. I want him to serve me ice cream for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And that's their hobby. Maybe they have ice cream date nights. We are not to know.
I need to know about their fetishes. Whatever they
don't
get
need to know what they're
rocky
into.
road is up to them.
That is indeed their own business. So yeah, nothing else really to take from that talk particularly, unless you've got any other notes.
No. Yeah, that's good. Let's
move on to Tamara Runia, first councillor in the Women's General Presidency. Is she the one that's an online influencer, or is that someone else?
Oh,
I know one of the female leaders of the church, one of the general officers, is some sort of online influencer. But Tamara Runia, even if she's not, she does speak well. I think she was very eloquent. I think she spoke very well. She was very engaging, and so I was quite happy that she was speaking, because sometimes some of these people, their cadence, they do speak with that conference voice, and it's very.
I thought she did. I think she still had a little bit of a Mormon, female Mormon voice. However, I thought leaps and bounds better than a lot we've had.
Amy Wright yesterday.
Yes.
Tracy Browning still holds the crown for just dropping the Mormon voice entirely. She just speaks from the heart, like a normal person. And so, yeah. That's great. Nathan Imbler has dropped a $5 super chat. Thank you very much. He says, "Thank you, Nemo. Your channel has provided so much healing for me. Your conference coverage helps abate the anxiety
I'm
you have this weekend."
All I'm saying is, if they need me, I'm here.
I would absolutely love to see you at conference, Ruth, in your
Could you imagine
Mormon woman power suit or whatever it is. Like, I don't know if you notice, if you see like the top-down shot of the conference center, there's all these men in black and maybe grey suits, but a dark grey. They're all matching. The only thing different is their ties, and even their ties were all quite muted. And then you see this pop of color in the middle, which is the sisters. Because they're all wearing their colored outfits. I love that. I love seeing that pop of color. Like, yes, that's great. And I'd love to start to see the men just looking less dour. I'm all for the minimalist aesthetic. I like, quite clean lines and whatnot, but just put some vibrant, wear some fun socks or something, I'd love to know.
We wouldn't be able to see anyway, would we?
Anyone that's been in the conference center and seen the socks of the brethren, let me know, because I would love to imagine that David A. Bednar, for all his dour aesthetic and all his very seriousness, he's just got a pair of, sort of pink Pringle socks on,
a little bit natty.
Argyle socks.
Yeah, it'd be great, wouldn't it? I am noticing,
rather than the corporate look that they've all brought from their work lives. Sorry, carry on, Ruth.
Getting off the lovely Tamara. There was a lot of moustaches in the choir,
including the Ned Flanders lookalike, right?
Absolutely.
It's the guy who, I say this with no offense, has cracking facial hair. Facial hair I could only dream of.
Yeah, amazing.
It looks like he gets a 5 o'clock shadow at 10 in the morning.
Yeah. But that's the thing now. I didn't realise. I didn't realise how very popular a good old 80s moustache was.
Moustaches are coming back generally, I think, amongst younger people. They're kind of coming back into vogue. I saw quite a few when I was talking around BYU.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You see on the Mon rugby players at the moment as well, quite a lot. Quite a few rugby players are sporting them.
Gosh.
Yeah. Anyway, should we start talking about conference again?
Tamara didn't have a moustache. Very well put together lady. I did like how her talk started out talking about reading a book that was saying you don't need to be perfect. Heaven is for people who've been forgiven, not for perfection.
Love that.
I wish that was what the actual narrative of the church taught, but I liked that she said that that's what it was.
I like that she said it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Doug Vincent sent this in a super chat, said this is in recognition of Ruth and all the women of the Brit Avengers. Quite right.
We love you, Doug.
Great to see Doug in the chat. So she quoted Russell M. Nelson twice. He said, the Savior loves us always, but especially when we repent. I don't like the fact that she's kind of espousing what we'll see later on in some talks as well. This kind of like, Jesus loves all of us, but he's got a special love for members of the church. He's got a special love for those that do these sorts of things. I don't like that sort of narrative.
No,
It's like, Jesus loves you, but I'm his favorite kind of thing, right?
There's unconditional love, and then there's unconditional love plus. Wow, it doesn't really work that way, does it?
My uncle had that as a bumper sticker. I don't know if you remember. He had it as a bumper sticker on his van. It said, Jesus loves you, but I'm his favorite.
Well, apparently that's what Laurie Vallow Daybell is renowned for saying as well.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That's not a narrative we want to espouse particularly.
No, not particularly.
Yeah. So she talked about shame in a good way, though.
Yes.
Sorry, your points first. Sorry.
She did talk about shame, but she brought Satan into it. And again, when we're talking about that whole second coming narrative and, you know, pain and suffering, the world's going to burn. And then we're going backwards and we're going back to Satan, and Satan being a real person that is using this. It's Satan's voice which tells us our mistakes. And I think she said something about you are not the voice in your head straight after she talked about Satan. And I was thinking, okay, are we going down the road of who is the strange voice that I'm hearing in my head? You know, am I listening to Satan? Is this a demon that's trying to tell me something? And again, I'm just worried that for some people, they will be listening to that and it will be feeding a certain narrative.
Yeah. I also found it interesting that she said you may even hear hide. I think she was talking about, you know, hide yourself away and all that sort of stuff. But what is interesting is Satan in the endowment tells Adam and Eve to go and hide. He informs them that they're naked and says, go and hide your nakedness. And they run and they hide. And so I found that quite interesting, that Adam and Eve, they obey Satan in the endowment. That's always been a bit of an interesting thing for me. The endowment ceremony, Satan tells them to do something and they do it. And that's never fully addressed. Yeah,
it is interesting. And also, obviously, that, you know, God makes us naked. Satan's the one that gives us clothes, but we're a church that's absolutely obsessed with modesty culture and wearing clothes just like Satan wanted us to. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying I want to walk around without any clothes. I know I wouldn't do that to the world, but it's a weird story when we've got this bad guy narrative, but we're obeying him and we're doing what he says, and then as a church we are following his instructions about what to do and how to clothe ourselves, and it's just a weird dynamic, isn't it? Are we in the bad place?
Yeah, well, I mean, we could get into that show. She also said a part about your worth is always high, your worth doesn't move.
I
really like that.
Yeah, I really like that.
And again, I don't want to be all glass half empty about it. I would just love her to have maybe acknowledged that that wasn't always the teaching, and that there were times when young women particularly were taught that their worth was diminished by certain actions, or even by the way they dressed, licked cupcakes, etc., etc. Who would want this, chewed gum,
walking porn.
Yeah, I wish she would have just gone, contrary to previous teachings, your worth doesn't diminish, or just something like, just to acknowledge that you may have heard other messaging, but that's not what we want you to hear or feel anymore.
Yeah, right? And I think it's telling that she is in Young Women's Presidency, and so her message perhaps was written with a particular audience in mind that need to hear things in this way. So maybe for an older generation, they're hearing it thinking, well, that's a little bit out there. But actually, this is what the younger generation are really going to resonate with. That, yeah, they need to know that their worth is in no way diminished at all by whether or not they're obedient. Their worth is their worth is their worth.
Yeah.
And I also liked her analogy with the diving, that, yes, it's about execution, and how we perform on the day, but it's also about the degree of difficulty and the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And I thought that was really, really a good analogy to use. Do you want to talk about the iron rod?
No, I think we'll move on from that. There was quite a bit of innuendo in her talk, shall we say, smut and filth, and unfortunately, I've spent too much time with you, Ruth, and the other ex-Mormons of the Britvengers, and you've corrupted me.
Oh,
And
well.
yeah, and that's
Yeah.
that's the problem, really, isn't it? So anyway, Bishop
But I'm
Caussé,
not sorry.
Bishop Caussé, he is the presiding bishop of the church. Immediately, I'm very glad he didn't talk about money, because it would have given me plenty of reason to then start just going on about how he oversaw Enzyme Peak, he oversaw all sorts of scandal. He oversaw putting 1 million on a form and saying, "Oh, we didn't need to put like an accurate answer. We just wanted to put that down to show that we didn't feel like we needed to answer at all." Okay,
Yeah.
all right, just lie to the government. Why don't you?
Yeah.
But he didn't. He talked about he's got a bit of a thing for Neil A. Maxwell, because he quoted Neil A. Maxwell, and he talked about how he rushed to the Champs-Elysees to hear Neil A. Maxwell, and he used that as an introduction to kind of say, sometimes the desires of our hearts are enough for God to bless us, which as a message is quite nice, right? As long as you're trying, God will bless you for it. But Ruth, your reaction seems to be telling me you took something different from it, and I'd like to hear it.
No, I found that quite interesting as a story, because we've had a lot of sort of stuff going on about this statue coming out about the wise virgins, and I'm thinking, okay, he arrives late to a meeting and he gets let in. He arrives late to hear an apostle speak. He prioritizes work commitments over hearing an apostle speak, and he gets let in. How does that equate with being a wise virgin and sacrifice and prioritizing your calling? And do you know what I mean? It's like we've got two different narratives going on at all times. So I'm glad that he got there, and I'm glad he was able to listen to it, and I'm glad it meant a lot to him. But yeah, he then went on to talk about everyone's going to get a chance. We're not held accountable for things that are beyond our control. Through the atonement, through Jesus Christ, as long as we can endure to the end, we can overcome all of life's challenges. I just think it's totally at odds with a lot of the other messaging that we're getting.
Yeah, and I think maybe the story of the parable of the virgins would be different if they'd not been able to get any oil, right? Maybe it's the idea that they chose to leave it to the last minute. And he's arguing that, well, there are things that we can't do. But he did also talk about, people in circumstances out of their control, and people that were sort of disadvantaged, members of the church that were disadvantaged. And Peter Bleakley sent a message that I thought was really interesting. He said, "I thought we gave Caussé a fortune so that there weren't going to be any disadvantaged members."
That's a really good point.
I thought we gave this man the widow's mite so that there wouldn't be disadvantaged members of the church. Thank you, Peter, for sending that in.
There certainly shouldn't be anyone who, if a financial input could make a difference to the disadvantage that they're suffering, we certainly shouldn't have anyone in that way. So if they need a medical intervention that requires money, we've got the money. If they need a house, we've got the money. If they need, treatment for counselling for abuse, we've got the money. That we've got the money to throw at all of those sorts of issues as a church. And do you know what? There's sometimes I don't believe anymore, but there's sometimes I think I really hope they get their comeuppance, because they will be held responsible for sitting on those purse strings instead of actually sharing it with the people who are in struggling circumstances. He mentions illness, limited resources, and abuse as trials that limit our progress. Well, they are directly limiting people's progress if they're aware of those things and are
continuing to take their money,
ignoring those situations when they could intervene.
Yeah, and we had it mentioned yesterday, wherein have we clothed you and fed you and all these sorts of things, inasmuch you've done it to least of these my brethren, you've done it unto me. That's what Christ said, and they don't listen to that.
And
Their
Christ
priority,
said, leave everything and just follow me. Don't take any thought for what money in your purse. Just leave it all and follow me.
I've been listening to, without getting too deep into it, I've been doing some reading on the efficacy of direct cash um, direct cash donations or infusions to poorer communities. And there's been an argument that I hear predominantly from Americans. I tend to hear this argument of, if you just give people money, then they'll spend it on this or they'll spend it on that and they won't better themselves. Actually, the data seems to be showing that if you just give people money rather than trying to establish infrastructure, they will build what they need to build. They will do what they need to do to improve their lives.
Yeah.
And so some of the best charities in terms of amount of charitable work done for every dollar or every pound that you give tend to be direct giving charities like that. So if the church is in this sort of mindset that I've heard coming out of Americans that, well, we don't just want to give people money, that's not charity, that's just foolish, whatever. Okay, fine, maybe they don't want to do that, but they could still absolutely support members in more concrete ways than I've heard. There are people that get food bills paid for. My family were recipient of the church's help at times, but equally I hear stories of people who do not get help.
Yeah.
And I think the church could, at the very least, improve the consistency of how well they support their members financially or
and
otherwise.
I've been in that excruciating situation as a Relief Society president of having to go through with a family and say, what are you spending your money on? What can you go without? This is all the bishop's prepared to give you. I'm going to go and do the shopping for you because you're not trusted with this money, and you've got to choose the lowest budget items. It's just at their lowest point, it's the most insulting, degrading thing to have to do to a family, to do it in that way. But that's what they would rather do, rather than just give freely and say, you know what, we know you're good for it because you will give back in service and kindness and love and generosity. And when life is good for you, we know that you will come through and you'll pay it forward. And I think, and
that's where discernment would come in, right?
Yeah,
Bishop's abilities to discern the heart of the individual that's seeking help rather than just throwing cash at people, because that's not what anyone's advocating. Otherwise, because you can imagine the church would become a target for freeloaders or the sort of people who would just want to take and not give. But that would be for the power of discernment that bishops should have. Anyway, he ended with this phrase: "It's by grace we are saved after all we can do." And that phrase changes amongst various Christian denominations, just depending on where you put the emphasis, right? It is by grace we are saved after all we can do, or it is by grace we are saved after all we can do, etc. Right? It really changes the meaning. And I feel like the church does the second kind. They really put the emphasis on what we can do. And if we do everything, then grace will make up the gaps.
Yeah.
Who
is this grace? Where is she?
Who is she? And and how can I access the grace that will save me?
Yeah.
Let's have a look at something that people may not have noticed. I want you to really, really listen to this, VT. Henry B. Eyring seems to lose his way when he's talking. And so he gets a prompt. You can hear the prompt come in. I don't know where it's come from. I don't know if it's come to it. I don't think it's an earpiece. I can't see one. I don't know if it's someone next to him whispering it to him.
I'm listening.
But listen carefully. Oh, that's the wrong thing. Okay, stand by. We will get that in a moment. Let me just make sure I've got the file correct. Or I might have to re-export it, which is fine. I can do that in a moment. So what are your thoughts on this, Ruth? While I get that ready, I want to get your thoughts.
On him being prompted?
On Gerrit W. Gong.
Oh,
on his talk, yes. While I get this ready.
It wasn't an awful talk. I just felt like somebody had said to him, right, there's if you win this bet, $100 for you, Gerrit, if you can mention Jesus Easter the most. If you can get as many references in there as possible, because he just seemed to just go for it. And there were times when I felt like it was a little bit word salady, and it was about stream of consciousness, linking words together, linking phrases together, so that you kind of look back and feel like, I know there was a lot about Easter and Palm Sunday and Holy Week and Jesus and Easter, and I think he'd been given the task of doing that, and it sort of was meant to overwhelm people and wash over them, so that if they look back, they'd say, yeah, we've always done Holy Week, we've always done Palm Sunday, we've always done this, we've always done that. He was trying to normalize something that is really,
as I said yesterday, it's still on the church's website that we do not celebrate Holy Week. That's still on the church's website.
I love for them that somebody hasn't even bothered to update the website.
Yeah. I literally wrote this word salad. We haven't discussed this before. I wrote word salad down. Yeah, right here. Because here's an example of that word salad for everyone. And I've currently got the prompt loading, so we'll get that in a moment. Right, here's the word salad.
Easter spring season testifies spiritual sequence and convergence are both part of the divine pattern of atonement, resurrection, and restoration through Jesus Christ.
What?
This sacred and symbolic convergence comes not by accident or coincidence.
You said a lot of words, but I'm really struggling to pass out what they mean together as a sentence.
It'd be interesting to see what they actually print in the church magazine or on the website, because it will make a coherent sentence by the time it gets put out there. Who knows? But as it was, I just felt like he's just saying as many things as he can to create an image rather than actually give a message.
Yes. Well, here's Irene getting a prompting, so everyone listening carefully.
All press on. We will then hear from Elder Garrett W. Gong of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He will be followed by Elder John A. McCune of the 70.
Did we hear someone whisper, John? Did we hear that whisper? Go back to here. Let's play it again.
John A. McCune.
Back here. Listen again.
By Elder John A. McCune of the 70.
Don't know why I'm pointing that out. Don't know why I'm mentioning it particularly. I just find it really interesting that there's the ability for someone to prompt him, and that you can hear it. It's like when we saw Oakes mouthing some of what was being said at the introduction of Russell Nelson as prophet of the church. It was just a bit unusual. I thought I'd bring it out. But back to Gong. He talks about God's plan of moral and mortal agency, which seems to be playing the sort of Bednar game of the sort of Bednar game of, it's not agency as we've previously understood it. It's moral agency. It's the ability to choose within the confines of the agreed to actions you've already kind of put yourself, or the agreed to covenants you've already put yourself under.
Yes.
Yeah.
I hadn't really focused in on that. I was focusing in more on the Easter messaging. That's
this phrase. This is Easter in Jesus Christ. He's using Easter as a noun there that's a doesn't
weird
fit.
Phrase, isn't it?
Yeah.
Easter in Jesus can heal grief. Easter in Jesus Christ is salvation. Easter in Jesus Christ is spiritual transformation. What?
Yeah. He's come up with this catchphrase, Easter in Jesus, which I don't know what that means. I couldn't seem to, and maybe it's just me missing it, but I couldn't seem to figure out what that meant.
I honestly don't think he knows what he means. He just needs to say the words. And likewise, talking about it being Palm Sunday and Holy Week, and we've got a shallow bed of using those phrases in Mormonism. I don't think if you stopped a Mormon in the street and said, "What happens on Holy Week then? What sort of activities would you expect to see?" I think they would look at you a little bit perplexed, because who knows? It's not part of their cultural heritage.
And similarly, if they understood the scriptures, they would look at you equally perplexed when you hear someone talking about being visited by Elijah and Elias at the same time.
And also came as a resurrected Jesus Christ, Moses, Elias, Elijah, returned priesthood keys and authority at the newly dedicated Kirtland Temple on Easter Sunday, 1836.
Yeah. So we just had another one of those.
Did you think? Sorry, just
anything else,
to
or-
go back to him.
Yeah.
Did you think there was? I was interested to hear him talking about Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and then he seemed to want to talk about Egypt a lot. And
Yes, he did.
I was waiting for him to jump to the Book of Abraham, and he didn't go there. But do you know what I mean? I felt like
smart of him.
Yeah.
Not to go there.
Not to go there. But I was thinking, where are you going with this? Why have you got, Joseph and Mary taking baby Jesus off into Egypt? Why does it matter to you about all these different quotes and of the different faith groups and Egypt? But yeah, just wanted to talk about those things. So interesting talk. Yeah. Do you want to move on?
Yeah. John, our mate John A. McCune. He is the president of the Asia North Area Presidency. And this is where we got some of that narrative about Jesus loves you more if you are one of his special favorite people, which I don't appreciate. Here we go.
Disciples, when we make and keep sacred covenants, we are blessed with spiritual power. We are connected to Christ and God the Father in a special relationship and can experience their love and joy in a measure reserved for those who have made and kept covenants. Our ability to sense a full measure of God's love or to continue in his love is contingent upon our righteous desires and actions.
Yeah.
I love prosperity gospel.
You get to be Jesus' special favorite. That's the antithesis to the universalist message that we were hearing just a couple of talks ago.
Yeah.
About how God's not going to judge you for what you didn't know. And Joseph prays about his brother because he wants to know what's going to happen to people who didn't have a chance to join in. And he's told it will be fine. There's the universalist message of the gospel that I always grew up hearing. And now you've got this guy going, oh, but Jesus loves his special favorite people a bit more than the others. Like,
I think you could either get whiplash listening to this session of conference, or you could see it as buffet Mormonism, which is pick the talk that resonates with you, ignore the rest. Because there's something for everyone on this buffet, isn't there?
Well, someone said to me recently, don't listen to conference and sort of analyze what people are saying to the membership. Listen to conference and listen to what people say to each other. These brethren are not speaking to the membership of the church so much as they're speaking to each other. And that it will reveal internal tensions within the leadership of the church, particularly the 12. You see from the 70s, they're all just trying to suck up to which apostle they think, the cynical take is they're trying to suck up to the apostle that they think is going to give them the best ticket to then getting promoted themselves, right? So you see one of them will quote Bednar directly as he speaks after Bednar. Others will try and speak to Uchtdorf because they think his brand of Mormonism is going to be more successful. It's that sort of politics almost, I would imagine, going on there. But did you get anything else from his talk? Because
he created a false binary, which I didn't like.
Go on then.
Well, he was talking about he was just talking about covenants and this joy or suffering. And I was thinking, no, that's not what this is all about. It's not if you have your covenants and you're a disciple of Christ that you're prevented from suffering and you'll experience it just created this false binary and I just felt like we're back to the sort of black and white thinking of Mormonism. And he also said to me, I've paraphrased it, this is my words, not his. God isn't overly worried about suffering because we've got the next life, we've got death, and then the eternity is heaven together. That doesn't sound like a very nice God to me, because then earlier in the talk he was saying he's perfectly kind, perfectly loving, perfectly understanding, but also doesn't really care if you suffer.
Well, no, it's more that he understands the greater perspective. So essentially he understands, as some apologists have put it, that you chose to be here, chum. You chose to do this to yourself. Any of this suffering you inflicted on yourself is
But
what
down
apologists
that
will argue.
route, down that logical route lies, well, then I'll just end it. Or
That's where nihilism lives.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Because
it can.
if this life is crappy and there's no route out of it, and this is, people for whom life might just be a really hard place, or living the church structure might be really, really hard for lots of reasons. That seems to make logical sense. It's utter lunacy, but it seems to make logical sense by this sort of rhetoric that God isn't terribly worried about you suffering in this life because of the better stuff to come. So why live to 90 then? Why not just drop out of this life sooner rather than later?
Oh, and some people do go down that route.
Exactly.
And it's a terrible thing.
Yeah, it's dangerous to use that sort of rhetoric in a cavalier sort of way.
Yeah, well, he said, how can God have a fullness of joy when some of his children are suffering so much? It kind of seems like a sort of reframing of the question of evil. How can God be good when children suffer, right?
He quoted Nelson and said that he was talking about Nelson giving them their calling on the same day that his daughter had died from cancer. And this is at the point that my daughter was in the kitchen making food, and she just turned around and just looked at me. She went, "That is psychotic," which is true. What is he doing the day job when he should be at his daughter's bedside? And it's because of this mentality of this life.
Oh, well, I'll see her again.
I'll see her again.
Yeah.
So that is absolutely psychotic. And so my daughter completely nailed it, which is, that's crazy. But they see that as a positive, that he was doing the right thing by being there to give him the calling and pat his wife on the hand, rather than sit with his daughter and make her last few moments on the planet feel like her dad cared.
Sad stuff. But it's okay, because God provided a way through Son Jesus Christ for all of us, his children, to overcome the pain, suffering, sins, guilt, and loneliness of mortality. But that doesn't actually answer the question of how can God be joyful when we're suffering? Because just knowing that, there's a way for it all to be better later on, doesn't negate the effects of the suffering as they happen. So that time where the suffering is occurring, in theory, God shouldn't be joyful.
No.
You wouldn't think.
No, and if God cares about, every hair on our head, every feather on a sparrow, all of those sorts of things, he should be there in the suffering. He should be there in every single moment, because yes, we might have chosen this plan, but he chose this as the way to teach us. And if he's our Father, there's lots of ways to teach your children, certain things about themselves. So he has picked this way for us to learn these lessons, and he jolly well ought to be beside people when they're suffering and not just go, never mind. It's all going to come good in the end.
No points for empathy here, John A.
No.
We have finally, we have Dan H. Oakes, who I thought this talk would be a bit more sort of rocking than it was, as it were. I thought it was going to be quite harsh, but he seems to have not softened in his old age, but maybe slightly softened in his old age, or he's just less blunt about.
I think you just have a really low expectation for him, and maybe he's slightly better than par.
Okay, fair enough. He started by saying our mortal life always begins with a father and mother. What about Jesus?
No, he just wanted to get proclamation for the family in the talk.
Absolutely. Because anyone that comes back and goes, "Oh, it's not possible for anyone to be born without a father and mother," what about the miraculous conception of Jesus Christ?
Yeah, and snails. So there.
Seahorses also.
Exactly. But also, if you happen to not have a family dynamic where there's a father and a mother, that's part of your trials to overcome. Whatever.
Yeah. Oakes then talked about the parable of the virgins. It's the third time this has had a mention in this conference, at least.
Yeah.
And here's what he had to say about people who are not prepared. So this is what he had to say about, basically people like he would view people like me, or you, or anyone that's left the church, or anyone who's not 100% orthodox. Because this is not a man who holds space for the unorthodox or the heterodox. This is a man who wants people orthodox. Here we go. Then I will get smoother at this, people, by the end, and I'll forget it all ready for next conference, because that is the way of these things.
Disappointing that so many remain unprepared.
He's not angry, he's just disappointed. Sorry, we can carry on.
For their appointed meeting with our Savior and Redeemer, Jesus Christ. His parable of the 10 virgins, spoken of so frequently in this conference, suggests that of those invited to meet him, only half will be prepared. We all know examples of the unprepared. Returned missionaries who have interrupted their spiritual growth by periods of inactivity. Youth who have jeopardized their spiritual growth by separating themselves from church teaching and activities. Men who have postponed their ordination to the Melchizedek priesthood. Men and women, sometimes the posterity of noble pioneers or worthy parents, who have departed the covenant path short of making and keeping covenants in the Holy Temple. Many of such deviations occur when members fail to follow the fundamental spiritual maintenance plan
Can
of
I add
personal
another?
prayer.
Yeah.
I was going to add another category there. Leaders who have lied to their membership, gaslit, put electrodes on them and shocked them for and then lied about that as well. All of those sorts. Let's talk about those. Let's not talk about the youth who might have struggled and not
Not got ordained quick enough.
Not got ordained quick enough, or somebody who's come back from the mission traumatized and decided the church isn't a healthy place for them to be. Let's talk about the leadership who are not only getting paid a healthy whack of money, but also make a ton of money out of book sales and everything else that they do. Let's talk about them and their activities which led to the church as an organization which they represent being fined by the government in America for defrauding them of taxation. Let's talk about that. Tell me about that, Dallin.
And here's what he comes out with about, here's what you need to do to stop this happening to you.
Many of such deviations occur when members fail to follow the fundamental spiritual maintenance plan of personal prayer, regular scripture study, and frequent repentance.
Regular prayer won't stop you discovering the things the church hid from you. Studying the scriptures may well reveal the things the church hid from you. And repenting, again, learning things about the church that were not shared with you has no bearing on your personal worthiness.
No.
It just none at all. It's not sinful to learn things that the church hid from you.
No.
So
and
regular repentance is not going to fix that.
Yeah. And to be hugely disappointed and feel hugely let down and act on that new knowledge, which is, this is an organization that feels comfortable lying to me. This is an organization that I can no longer trust, and it's run by people that would rather perpetuate the lies than be honest and model what repentance looks like, which is, we got it wrong, we're sorry, we're going to do better.
That's why, and so for many people, or certainly for some people, they will hold on to Jesus Christ, and they'll still believe in Jesus Christ. They'll still believe in the redemptive power of the atonement. They'll still believe in repentance. They'll still believe in the remission of sins through the atonement.
Yeah.
And realize that the institution that taught them about Jesus Christ wasn't honest with them about other things.
Yeah. he talked about Lucifer. He talked about that plan, and he talked about, again, second mention of Satan. Lucifer became Satan because he wanted to destroy agency, and he's got the power to blind, deceive, and lead us captive. Again, I'm listening to it thinking, how would a child at conference interpret that sort of message? But also, who is it that's destroying agency? Because I think he needs to go and have a chat with Bednar about what agency we have and what agency we don't have. And
Yes.
I think Bednar and him need to get on the same page with the whole agency thing, because Bednar essentially has said, you were born, you gave up your agency.
Yeah. Bednar is the arbiter of agency in the church. You know, he seems to be the authority on it. So
And if
either
if controlling agency is the mark of Satan, join the dots.
In contrast, some neglect weekly renewal of covenants by not partaking of the sacrament.
I partook of the sacrament right up until I was excommunicated.
Some say the church is not meeting their needs. Those substitute what they perceive as their future needs ahead of what the Lord has provided in his many teachings and opportunities for our essential service to others. Humility and trust in the Lord are the remedies for such deviations.
Humility and trust in the Lord. That's another, like, well, don't worry about what we said or haven't said, just Jesus will make it fine.
And distrust your inner voice that is telling you what is healthy and right for you, and carry on. And we've seen that time and time again where people put themselves in unhealthy relationships, in unhealthy situations, go above and beyond until they're broken, because they're waiting for it to come right and they're waiting for it to suddenly fall into place, and it doesn't. And they ignore, and they train themselves to ignore their own inner moral compass and that voice that tells them, this is a boundary for me, this is healthy, this isn't healthy for me, and knows themselves well enough. And going back to that sister that gave the talk earlier, the young women's member of the Young Women's Presidency, she was much more about, understand what you can do. Yes, it's about the execution, but it's also about understanding how hard you're trying and the difficulty that you're trying to perform at. And I think, I didn't expect anything different from Oakes. I just don't like the guy.
Just a final point is, I still believed in the teachings of Christ. That it was the teachings of Christ that made me so angry with the church for lying.
Yeah.
Because it was Christ that modeled the fact that you shouldn't behave that way and that you should be like, like it was the teachings of Christ that made me think the church should be accountable and change
and could be better.
And could be better.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I don't understand why he thinks that people are not doing these basics. They still are. It's reading their scriptures and reading the teachings of Christ and then seeing how the church doesn't link up to that drives many people to lose trust in the organization, or to lose, for some people, to lose a belief that the organization is what it claimed to be. For example, I've said in the past, I discovered the church wasn't true because I discovered the version of the church that I grew up believing was true wasn't true. That wasn't a true thing. That wasn't honestly what the church was. It was something different. You know? So a couple of more super chats I want to read before we wrap it up. Kalena Songbird says, I enjoy General Conference only so I can hear your views. Well, that's lovely, thank you.
Aww.
And Ruth's views too, I'm sure, because Ruth's much wiser than I am. I left the church after 30 years of membership, and your perspective is all I can tolerate. Not many people tend to describe me as tolerable, so thank you very much, Kalena.
I'm a 33-yearer.
There we go. JD France, paying tithing to Nemo, not the corporation, is here. Thank you very much. And then Jacob Berg, thank you very much, Jacob Berg. Good to see you. Guten Abend out der Schweiz. Thanks for the halftime show. Good to see you, Jacob. Thanks for being in the comments and thanks for the support. We have one more session to go, people.
You have one
more session to go.
All kudos to you, because I feel like I've earned my stripes just sitting through that one session. it's a lot. And well done anybody else who's actually sitting through it. And I hope you're getting something out of it. And if you need to set a boundary and say, I don't want to listen to it, then just listen to Nemo, and you've done your part.
Yeah, and come listen to our friend Spencer Davis, who's been in the chat as my foil this whole time. I'm just smiling at these comments at this point.
Is that your mum? Is that your mum? Yeah.
Spencer Davis might be my mum. I don't know. I can't confirm or deny. Spencer says you can't just say you agree with what Jesus said. Well, why can't you?
I can say what I like, Spencer.
Why can't I say that I agree with the teachings of Jesus when I do? Like, what? Why can't I say that?
It's probably going to say you can't wear odd socks either.
Yeah, I can't wear my pink Argyle socks. Damn it. I really wanted to wear my pink Argyle socks.
Oh, bless him.
Right, final super chat. Nemo, you're the best of us. We love you. I'm not sure I'm the best of you, but I do my best. I try my best. And I claim the right to be flawed and fallible because I don't claim to speak for a deity. And on that note, let's have one more session of those who do claim to speak for deity the next session starts in half an hour. I'll be watching that, and then we'll go live as quick as we can afterwards. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss it, and tap the notification bell. Like this video if you don't want to watch another one but did like this one. And if you really didn't like it, well, just hit the dislike button, because it's all engagement, and that's all that matters. Thank you very much, everyone, and I'll see you soon. Take care.